and he says, my fear is that the new boss is going to be the same as the old boss. And that encapsulates thousands of years of human history until this moment in time, when suddenly men who fought the wars, right, who were conscripted, suddenly moved from subjects to citizens. They finally had a say, the men who fought the wars, in whether they would go to war or not. Welcome to the Salty Pastor Podcast. It is the week in which we celebrate the birth of the United States of America. It is the week of July 1st through July 4th. The 4th being on Friday in the year 2025. I'd like to ask a simple question today, and that is, in our country, how's it going? How are we doing? And the reason I want to ask that question is because it's very similar to the question that I ask you almost every single podcast, and that is, this is your life. How is it going? The Salty Pastor here is to coach you up in building a real, authentic life. That's right. I want you to have a life that is real. I want you to have a life that is authentic, right? And the way we do this is by focusing on the necessary elements, the key ingredients of a real, authentic life. Now, the reason you need to do that is because we live in a world today that is filled with options. But the majority of the options that we are confronted with each and every day, they distract us from doing the real hard work of the foundational stones that build a real, authentic life. I was listening to a British comedian a while back, and he does live shows, and kind of the reason people go and see him so much is because he just takes questions from the audience, and then he always builds off of that. And a young man, probably about 20 years old, just asked him a question, and it was a little serious. He said, "So what is the secret to a good life?" And the comedian stopped, and he said, I'll give you a real answer. He said, "Hard choices now, great life later." What a great statement. If you're willing to make hard choices now, then the potential for a great life later is huge. And that seems to be the dilemma. Today, we live in a world in which people are not that interested in making hard choices now. They want to postpone all their hard choices. They want to postpone the choice of what kind of career or skill. They want to postpone their education. I know a lot of people young people that they graduate from high school, they want a gap year where they take a year off and go play. And then the gap year turns into a gap decade. We know people that want to just go out and party and play in their 20s. They don't want to make any serious decisions. And so we're postponing all of the hard choices, living off of borrowed time, borrowed money, and then you get to your 30s, 40s, and 50s and realize life is so much harder than you imagined. Just because you make hard choices up front doesn't mean that you have to live life hard. You just have to make a hard, good decision. And in doing that, what happens is you end up having a really great life later. It seems that our world today is so designed to distract us from developing those and considering those hard choices. In essence, what we're doing is we're living out the fairy tale of Peter Pan and the Island of Lost Boys. You know what's so funny about that story, that fairy tale, is that it was a parody. The Island of Lost Boys was a parody. It was supposed to be an insult, right? A bunch of boys that just won't grow up and become men. And the center of the story is the girl, and she grows up. And when she grows up, she wants a real authentic life. And Peter Pan kind of disappears because he cannot grow up. Well, guess what? Today, the Island of Lost Boys is the destination for everybody, it seems like. It reminds me of Pinocchio. Remember the carnival that he gets enticed to go to? And what happens is they're living there on I think it's Pleasure Island or something. They end up all turning into donkeys. And that's what happens is when you don't do the hard work up front, you end up becoming a donkey for everybody else. And so the Salty Pastor exists for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to coach you up in building a real, authentic life. And I want you to be able to think of the most important decisions to make now so that you have a great life later. Our goal is to give you the meat and potatoes of authentic life. It focuses on the truth, ideals, and principles and actions that would allow you to build a really great life later. And guess what? It's the same thing for our nation. Some people are wondering, how do we celebrate the 4th of July? Should we even celebrate the birthday of America? It's really interesting. A recent Pew survey just came out and said that among Americans, there's a large portion, like 30%, 40%, that aren't proud to be an American. About 2 years ago, they did a survey and they found that 60% of the people in America wouldn't fight for America if it went to war. Now, why is that? Well, there's various reasons. One is because social critical theory has so infected our schools that people are being trained and taught to hate America. And so ideology is being taught at the youngest level. But also another reason why is because people are being taught to hate Christianity. And you cannot separate the success and the formation of the United States of America from the core values of Christianity. Now, I often have said this, and that is democracy, representative democracy, a republic, whatever we have, is not particularly a Christian doctrine, right? But it grew out of the soil of Christianity. And if you take Christianity away, then whatever grows out of it dies. And that's what's happening today. And many people who are ideologically driven, people who are communist and socialist, expressly want to get rid of all Christianity. They want to eradicate it. Just like Karl Marx said, he felt religion was the opiate of the masses. He said, well, we have to get rid of it so that people can't feel good about their lives. We have to destroy their hope in order for them to participate in a revolution to overturn the power structures. So you have that going on. You also have a society that is sexually obsessed. And so it doesn't want any objective morality in regards to sexual or sexual identity. And because of that, it wants to get rid of Christianity or any type of belief system that holds to an objective truth in that regard. So the goal of the Salty Pastor is to not only help you grow your faith, but is also help you give insight on America and where it came from and why it's an incredible expression of what happens when a bunch of Christians get together and say, we don't want a theocracy, but we do want a form of government that is built on Christian principles. And so that's why America is called a Judeo-Christian nation. It's not called that because everybody in it is Jewish and Christian. That's not why. It's called that because it was built on those foundational principles. And you have to understand that there's a large group of people. Those people have taken over our educational system, both public and private, by the way, and are indoctrinating young people in the belief that free market capitalism, representative republic, even the Constitution itself, and Christianity are all detrimental to human flourishing, which could be the most incredible falsehood that anybody could ever believe. And so Salted Pastor here is to debunk that. And how do you do that? Well, it's all about faith. Really, it's all about faith. When you learn what faith is and you learn how to grow and mature your faith as an individual, that's how you experience the most out of life. It gives you meaning and direction. It gives you strength and endurance. It gives you self-awareness. It allows you to be happy when you should be happy. It allows you to be sad when you should be sad. In the end, though, a mature faith is the only thing that can bring you real, authentic joy. Now, one of the best questions you'll ever ask yourself about your faith is this. Faith is so important, and the Bible tells me to have faith. So what does my faith produce in my life when I grow it? How do I know my faith is growing and strong? How do I know it's mature? So if you want a mature faith, what are the signs of a mature faith? Well, first and foremost, guidance. You kind of know where you want to go and why you want to go there. Everyone's going somewhere. Most people have no idea where they're going, so they have no idea when they get there. There's an old Chinese proverb, wherever you go, that's where you are. One of the greatest products of faith is that you get to think about where you want to go and then actually get there. So it helps you on this individual level. But guess what? When you have faith, it also asks, where do I want my nation to go? nation's never perfect. It's never going to have any utopia. That doesn't exist because your faith tells you that all human beings, what? Are flawed, sinful beings. How can all of these flawed human beings come up with a perfect system? They can't. It's impossible. So you kind of realize, I don't want a utopia, but I want the best option for as many people as possible. So not only does faith give you guidance on an individual level about your own life, it also gives you a sense of where your nation should go. It gives you strength. When your faith is mature, it gives you strength to survive tough times and also to stay the course even when you're winning and doing well. It gives you courage. It gives you courage to admit the truth when the truth is right and admit you're wrong when you're wrong, and then courage to stay the course when you know the right thing to do. As an individual, you'll never go anywhere in life without courage. Our nation, if it doesn't get some courage, it's not going to go anywhere. One of the most perfect examples of a lack of courage is the fact that all the politicians right now are stealing the future of our country by spending trillions of dollars each year more than they bring in. Our national debt now is at $36 trillion, and they're adding $2 to $3 trillion to that every single year. This country will collapse if that is not turned around. That's a fact. There's no way that this country can survive going bankrupt. You can't go bankrupt in your own life and survive. Right now, you live in a country where you can declare bankruptcy and you can kind of restructure and you get freedom from creditors. Who does the United States of America appeal to and file for bankruptcy when it goes bankrupt? There is no one. America is it. So when it goes bankrupt, guess who ends up suffering that severe economic earthquake? Every single person living in America. That's right. What our politicians are doing today in order to give giveaways to people is stealing from our children and grandchildren in order to make our lives easier now. That is not only a travesty, it is evil. That's right. Stealing from your grandkids so that you can live better now is evil. And it's no wonder that our society and our politicians are doing that, because for the last 40 years, we've been aborting children so that we could make our lives easier. Is that salty? You better believe it. But is it true? 100%. That's why we not only need faith to have personal courage and courage for our country, but growing faith gives you confidence. It gives you confidence that you know what's right and what's wrong. That gives you a code of honor. A mature faith should say, let's have a code of honor. Let's be able to do the right thing now so that posterity's sake, our future generations can do better than we did. A growing faith gives you purpose. It gives you discernment. It tells you what's good and wrong, or good and bad, right and wrong, pure and evil. It tells you that right up front. And it'll tell you that bankrupting the country is an act of evil in what it does, because it destroys lives and it destroys generations. It destroys everybody. So I want to be able to say that not only is growing faith important and producing something in you as an individual, it's also important for us to be faithful and faith-filled in order to determine where our country should go. And this is the week where we celebrate the birth of America on July 4th. I'm even wearing my t-shirt. If you're listening on the podcast and not watching on YouTube, you can't see it, but it says, my favorite color is freedom. That's right, people. I love that. My favorite color. Independence Day, July 4th, is commonly known as the day in which we celebrate the ratification of the Declaration of Independence by the Second Continental Congress. So it was on July 4th, 1776. In this ratification of that document, America was born. That was 249 years ago. Wow. Now, most people know what the Declaration of Independence is, but very few people understand what made the signing of the Declaration of Independence possible. What drove the Continental Congress to form, what drove all of the colonists to seek freedom and desire to form a new government. The educational system, public and private, as I said earlier, has not taught any of the facts that drove the Continental Congress to do what it did. Very few people are aware. As a matter of fact, in universities today, the primary narrative you get is that it was formed by a bunch of racist white men who wanted to control everybody else. Now, you may think that the policies are wrong. You may think that you could come up with a better form of government. Socialists and communists certainly believe that. Progressive politicians certainly believe that. Professors on university campuses across the world believe that. However, none of them have ever proven it, by the way, but they believe that. But what you can't say is that the country was formed on racist ideology. That is absolutely unequivocally ridiculous, okay? America was the first national republic in the history of the world. A republic is a special form of democracy, meaning people vote for representatives. It's not a pure democracy where a decision is given, everybody votes on the decision, majority rules. A republic elects a representative to vote on your behalf. So they can vote in a way that might disagree with the general majority. But the other side of it is that a republic, what makes something a republic is not just that it has representative voting, but also there are proposed laws for rules of commerce, justice, and so forth that are established in a constitution. The government is restricted by the Constitution. And the first document of its kind ever written in the history of the world is the Constitution of the United States of America. And the reason why it was the first document of its kind is because it was written to enumerate the rights of the citizenry and limit the power of the government. Every other political document that was ever written was exactly the opposite of that. And that is, it iterated the rights and the power of the government or the monarch, and it limited the rights of the people. So this form of government in 1776 was the first government of its kind in the history of the world. So how in the world did that come about? How did they come up with this? Well, it came about because of core values. And that's right, we've been talking about core values, right? And that is, core values were critical. And so you have to ask yourself, what were some of the core values and where did they come from? And this is where you start to see the relationship between Christianity, the soil of Christianity, and the core values of what it said about who we are as human beings and how we should be governing ourselves, and this republic known as the United States of America. You see how symbiotic this relationship is. For instance, one of the core values in the Declaration of Independence, one of the very first things that was said is that all men are created equal. Now, at this time, this phrase predominantly countered the notion of the divine right of kings, okay? And the divine right of kings was a system of government. It was feudal in orientation, and that is, it was a system of lords and barons and so forth. And that is, in England or the British Empire, is that the king owned everything, right? And then what the king would do is grant the rights over certain lands. And these could be lords, they could be princes, they could be barons, and so forth. And what happened is then the people who lived on this land didn't own it, right? They were called subjects of the king. And so there were no citizens back then. There were only subjects, meaning you lived at the pleasure of the king. He had absolute authority over your life. So it was a form of slavery, right? And what's interesting is the number one thing that countered this 5,000-year-old belief was Christianity. That's right. What you have to understand, the divine right of kings was a belief that goes back thousands and thousands of years. You look back at the ancient Chinese dynasties, the Yuan and the Ming and all these dynasties. They all believed that these people had a special right to rule. You go back and you look at ancient Rome. Ancient Rome, you had to have a claim, right, that you were from the founding families or that you were a demagogue. That's why the Caesar was worshiped as God. Okay, you go back and you look at ancient Egypt, even prior to the Roman Empire, and you look at the pharaohs. They were all gods, okay? And so they all had a special right to rule over everybody else because they were extra special. And so this is a 5,000-year-old doctrine. Well, guess what happened is Christianity comes along, and at first it kind of just grows really, really slow. A lot of people don't know this, that 300 years of Christianity, when Christianity started to really influence the Roman Empire, when Constantine, the first emperor, was a Christian, only 5% of the Roman Empire was Christian. That's right, 95% were still polytheistic pagans and had a different religion. And yet, so they were still very small. So you have to understand that these truths took centuries to grow and ultimately infiltrate everybody. And it was a simple notion that all men, right, are created equal in the family of God. Galatians chapter 5, verse 1 says, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Therefore, stand firm and do not be subject again to a yoke of slavery." He was specifically talking about the Jewish law. He was specifically in this statement. But what happened is they realized, okay, that's the argument he's making, but the appeal he's making is that the reason why we don't have to abide by the Jewish law as followers of Christ is because what? We have been set free. So shouldn't that translate into the political arena as well? Why is it that I can be set free in the kingdom of God? And in God's eyes, I'm not any different than the king. I mean, I have the same value in God's eyes as the king. We're both adopted to his family. He doesn't have more of a divine right to rule over me than I over him. And so it was because of that Christian principle that America was founded. One of the first statements that you have the opening paragraph, right, in the preamble of the Constitution, and then you have the very first paragraph of the Declaration. And this is what it says. It begins with this sentence: "We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." In this one moment in time, a unique point of history, men on a grand scale suddenly moved from subjects to citizens. I mean, that is one of the most radical political revolutions in the history of the world. There's all kinds of revolutions and wars and people fighting, killing each other for power and stuff, but it was basically over the same belief, and that is, well, I'm going to get on this guy's side because he might win and be that guy, then he can rule us. There's an interesting song, if you remember the classic rock and roll in the 1970s by The Who. It's a song called "We Don't Get Fooled Again," and he said, in the lyrics of the song, is that I participated in the revolution. And he says, my fear is that the new boss is going to be the same as the old boss. And that encapsulates thousands of years of human history until this moment in time, when suddenly men who fought the wars, right, who were conscripted, suddenly moved from subjects to citizens. They finally had a say, the men who fought the wars, in whether they would go to war or not. This is the most incredibly significant experiment in the history of the world. It was daring across the board, and look where it has brought us. It has brought us to places we could never have imagined. Look at the core value, another core value, and that is right there in the preamble there of when it's talking, it says, it talks about that the government is formed by men for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to protect the rights that God has endowed men with. Right after the phrase I just read, if you keep going on, it says this, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, what ends is he talking about? It says the ends of protecting the rights of citizens. It says it is the right of the people. We have a right to alter or abolish it and to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Well, where did this notion come from? Well, it came from Ephesians chapter 1, Colossians chapter 1, Thessalonians chapters 1 and 2. All of these chapters point to the fact that people are adopted into the family of God and they are fellow heirs to the promise. You see, they have a right to form a government that protects their unalienable rights. And when a government becomes oppressive to that, they have every right to form a new government that will protect those rights. So what is it? I mean, I could go on and on and on about these core values, but you start to see that these core values that are written right into the Declaration of Independence all came from biblical principles, right? So how is it that we were able to not only articulate these, but then fight a revolutionary war and win? Well, it's because we had a uniformity of core values. Today, the reason why America is so divided is because we no longer have a uniformity of core values. This is the result of diversity and equity. It is a result of critical social theory. It is the result of communist ideology, socialist ideology. It is the result of progressive educational ideology. What these things have done is not bring Americans together. It has divided them along ethnic, language, cultural, and sexual identity lines. It has split people up into identity groups. It's often used or titled identity politics. What your rights as an individual, as a citizen of the United States of America is irrelevant. What matters is whatever group you identify with and what the outcomes are is what's most important about you. I would say that those are the least important things about you. The most important things about you are your soul. And the second most important thing about you is your character and the goals that you have, the dreams that you have. And finally, I would say the third most important thing about you is your faith. What kind of faith do you have? Now, we could talk about this over and over and over again. I love talking about this stuff because I think one of the most important things that we must do as individuals is we need to grow and mature our own faith in Christ. Because only when we grow our own faith in Christ are we going to find the guidance we need, the strength, courage, and confidence we need to get this country back on track so that it can flourish and that we see the difference between right and wrong. And what I mean by that is not a basic code, like is it wrong to speed or not, a basic law. What I mean is the difference between core values that bring health and vibrancy to a nation and the core values that destroy it. That is what I believe will bring us together and give our children a future. Not articulating and voting for core values that undermine and destroy us as citizens of the United States of America. Well, since my favorite color is freedom, I'm going to set you free today from the Salty Pastor. I'm going to have another episode dropping out on July 3rd, the day before the 4th of July. Woohoo! So we're going to dig into this just a little bit more. I'm so glad you're with us. Please go over to the website and sign up for that email. It's free. It goes out every Monday morning. I think it's going to bless you. Also, in that email are discussion questions that help you go a little bit deeper in the Salty Pastor as well. So love having you guys. It's been great to be with you. And remember, what you believe is one of the most important things about you.